Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Stay informed and stay vigilant. I have to make sure to get the presenting sponsor right now that we have one for extra points here with Shane Graham. But welcome in to a homemade bread day. That was the best option I had. We have one of our sponsors here in studio, so I don't know if he'll let me eat bread. We got it. Bread's not his friend, so we're gonna have to talk to him about bread. But it's homemade at least. And we got Ron on the board here. I don't know if do you eat a lot of bread? What's your favorite bread? You didn't know I was going to ask you that, did you?
I'd probably just stick with white bread.
You're just going to stick with the simple white bread? I had a friend that this was one of the most odd behaviors I've ever seen. I got to ask you about this. You would not approve this, Doc. So this is Dr. Michael Williams. He's in studio with us. He's one of our sponsors. He's got a great holistic internal health practice here in Grand Rapids, and he's my doctor, and he's helped me out a lot, and I want to talk to him about sports injuries and different things. But how about this for a snack habit? That I had a friend that just had a loaf of Wonder Bread that he would keep on his counter, and for a snack he would just have a singular piece of Wonder Bread with nothing on it. He wouldn't toast it, he wouldn't warm it up, he wouldn't put butter on it. He just ate Wonder Bread. It was the oddest snack that I can possibly imagine.
Imagine his blood sugar didn't like that very much either.
I don't think anything like that. I don't know. It just confused the heck out of me with that bread. Do you eat? You probably don't eat a lot of bread though.
Not a lot. Not a lot. It's if you're going to eat it, try to get the sprouted grain. That's usually going to be the best. And then find the balance. That's always what I like to talk about, is that we're shooting to get it right most of the time, but then if there's times where it doesn't make sense or you don't want to, then it's okay, but just make sure that most of the time you're eating the right stuff. So Dave quit with the Wonder Bread. I don't know. That was like 20 years ago, so I don't know if he still does that. I'll have to ask him. But Aaron, what'd you think of that game on Sunday here? I know people are sad. I'm curious what you saw. There were some interesting things, I think, about the game. I couldn't believe how quiet it was in that stadium there.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't even stay up to watch the whole thing. I got till about halftime. But it's one of those things with like Dan Campbell, though, and going for it on fourth down, where if he gets it, he's great, but then it's questionable if he doesn't get it. And I don't think he converted on any fourth down attempts in that game. But, I mean, at least it was somewhat of a close game. Defense gave him a shot. I just think they just needed to get more firepower on offense. I think Philadelphia just won the line of scrimmage from what I saw.
Well, I think the loss of Laporta was huge in this game. He's been so pivotal on the blocking and receiving side this year, and I think the loss, his loss, and the fact that they were going for it a lot, and they were running up the middle on third and fourth down a lot. I thought that was an odd play choice given the fact that they had that stout middle of the defense there, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, and they were tearing things up. So I felt like they needed to counter that a little bit and get to the outside, especially as well as Gibbs was doing to the outside, getting to the outside. So I like that they ran the double running back formations and all of that too. But yeah, the defense really, I feel like people will just look at the offense and say, well, that wasn't a great performance, which it wasn't, but it was on the road. It was against a tough team, but the defense played really well. McNeil looked like he was back. I liked that they kicked him out to end. They got Tyleik Williams in more. I thought that was a good advantage there for him. So the defense was very promising. We'll see what happens with the play calling and what they do with Campbell going forward. Now there's going to be negative memes about him wearing glasses. It was positive last week. Now the glasses, people are going to make fun of him for the glasses here. But your glasses wearer, Aaron, what's with all the hatred for the glasses? I don't get that.
I don't know either. And I was trying to think. I don't think Dan Campbell was wearing his glasses last game. I could be wrong.
We may have identified the problem. I think he had them on, but you're just used to it now.
Yeah.
it's just part of his look.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because if he wasn't wearing the glasses, then he needs to wear
Yeah, we might have almost identified the problem. We were close. Did you catch any of that game, Doc? Did you see the Lions game on Sunday?
Not that one, no.
No, he was out hunting for maybe not lions, but I don't know other things.
Not in Michigan.
Yeah, not here. But that was there was promising things to take out of the game as you always can, but they'll have to revise the we'll see what they do with the play calling, like I said. And yeah, well, they're gonna, hopefully Laporta can come back sooner than they thought here. That's going to be one of the keys to this to the offense as a whole. I think he was kind of one of the more underrated facets of this offense. But since nobody stayed up for the football game, I had a buddy texting me complaining about how late the football game is. I mean, when you got to get up in the morning on Monday, it is tough to watch like an 8:15 football game here. But I want to get Dr. Williams' knowledge here because, like I said, he runs a practice, Williams Chiropractic. And when you think of a chiropractor's office, you think of more just kind of, I'm going to go and get my back cracked and then have to come back the next week. But one of the reasons I was always resistant to going to a chiropractor, because that's kind of what I thought of the chiropractic business as a whole. But Dr. Williams is a family friend, and I started talking with him and realized he had a different approach. So I just wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to discuss that approach and kind of how you got to where you're at with your practice now, because it's been a couple of different iterations here.
Sure. Yeah. It actually, I started as kind of the type of chiropractor that you were talking about. I didn't really know any different, and so I would see people, and I sort of had the idea that you adjust them when you see them, and then as often as you need to keep things feeling good, that's how often you see people, and you adjust them every time you see them. And if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. And then it was a little while into practice, and I started to kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable with that idea, because it actually really started. I had two people that came in at about the same time, and they both had low back pain, and one of them with adjustments within a couple of visits was basically back to 100%, and the other one I hadn't made any difference with. And it started to bother me, because I thought, well, how is that possible? How is it that two people with the same problem get the relatively same treatment and have totally different outcomes? And so that got me thinking that there had to be more to the story. And so I started looking, and I started studying, and I started researching. And the first thing I did was I went back to school, and I became a digestive and internal health specialist. And that was to learn nutrition, to learn the gut, to learn how the body processes food, how it eliminates waste, what it does with everything that you're putting into it. And that filled in a lot of gaps. And then it left a little bit, which I went back to school again and started studying the brain. And so that was neurology, neuroanatomy, biochemistry, psychology, and it was just a way to understand how the brain and our thoughts affect our function. And with all of that, it started to modify my practice, because what I realized is that there were ways that the body got itself goofed up, and it comes down to, I guess what we have more of in this room than anything is men. Men are the problem. So, guys, your wives were right, and sorry to break the news, but
Mom agrees with that too in the corner. She's off mic, but she agrees with that.
No, that's a little joke we have in my practice, because what I figured out was that there are three ways that trouble happens in the body. There are mechanical things, there are emotional things, and then there are nutritional things. Those are three ways that the body gets itself into trouble. And so my practice that I have now sort of developed out of that idea is that if I know there are three ways that the body gets itself into trouble, I need to have ways to address it in all of those areas. So the first area, the mechanical stuff, chiropractic school did a great job of preparing me for that. And that's the stuff where things get knocked out of place. Mechanical things tend to have an event. It's an accident. It's an injury. It's it's the sort of thing where you can say, I know where I was, I know what I was doing, I know how I felt before it, and I know how I felt after it. And those are the kinds of things where an adjustment, that's, that first patient I was talking about with the back pain had a mechanical style injury. And so there were forces that moved things out of position, and I was able to apply forces that sort of countered that to put it back into the right position. And after a few times, we're back in business, back where things should be. But the other patient, the mechanical style approach didn't address the problem. And so what I would do now is I would start looking, well, okay, we know it's not a mechanical thing. What is it? And that's when we start looking at nutrition, and we look at the diet, and we look at how well we're how well we're digesting food, how well things are being absorbed into the body, and then how well the waste is able to be eliminated. Because if the body can't do that well, it can't perform and it can't heal. And then the last thing would be our thoughts, the emotional side of things. That's the last thing that we look at sometimes, and that's a little bit trickier. But it's the reason why how our thoughts affect the function. So it's the way that for some people, if they get angry, their blood pressure goes up, or other people that worry a lot get stomach aches, and so it gave me the tools necessary, one, to identify the problem, and then also a way to start correcting it, and in a way that allowed the body to heal and go back to normal.
I got interested in this approach because I think we can all relate to the fact that kind of the layman version of this, of what you're talking about, which is, all of us, when we have stress, everybody has stress, different things. You try to reduce it however you can, but there's two different ways to handle stress. You want to try to be proactive, but this was always something that I had as a criticism when I feel like a lot of doctors will be, well, you got to handle your stress. Well, I remember them telling my mom that when she went through 4 surgeries for her breast cancer. That's kind of hard. She's kind of stressed out because she's got breast cancer and she's dealing with 4 surgeries. It's kind of tough. So it's like, well, handle your stress. Okay, I got it. But obviously it's going to then manifest, even if it seems on the surface that you're handling it well, there's something that's going on either internally, or maybe it manifests externally as well, or kind of goes internal to external. We all have that. There's different things. I can think of a bunch of different examples from friends and family of ways that it has manifested. But to your point, like the stomach aches, and people will get shingles, people will get all sorts of different things from the stress, and getting to the root cause is important, because you can't just say, well, I have a stressful life. Okay, well, deal with it. Yep. That's not really a good, I'm no doctor, but I don't think that's really great advice. Got to give them some weapons to deal with it.
Well, the rule in my practice is that men are the cause of all the stress, and stress is what causes all disease. So if I had to say what is the one thing that I treat, it is stress. The question is, in what form does that stress take in the body? And that's where we look at the 3 ways, the mechanical, the emotional, and the nutritional, to understand how the body's getting itself into trouble. And that's where we, when you look at any injury, any disruption, any dysfunction in the body, it's going to follow one of those pathways. And so it's easy to kind of go through the checklist and say, all right, well, did I hurt myself physically? Was it in an accident? Was there some sort of a traumatic injury that affected my body? And if the answer is no, then you move on to one of the other ones. Did I eat anything differently? Did I change my diet? Did I decide that Wonder Bread for a snack every day was the right answer to solve my problems? or is there anything that I could point to in the way that I'm feeding my body that could be the problem? And if that's not there, then you look at, well, what's the last thing? Well, how are my thoughts? Do I have generally healthy thoughts? Or are they generally unhealthy? Are they normally of a positive nature, or are they normally of a negative nature? The body's going to follow whatever the prevailing thoughts are. So if you discover that that's where it is, there's a way that you can start to alter your thoughts to switch them in order to enable healing in the body.
I recently found out that the listeners for it may be flipped for the nighttime sports shows, but the listeners for Jethro are 60% women and 40% men. So this segment has been very popular, that we're talking about the men are the cause of all the evil here. Dr. Williams' practice is very popular with women. But I want to hit on some of these points. We're going to take a quick break, but I want to come back and hit on some of these points that he's talking about and talk about how this kind of can be extrapolated out to sports injuries, because we talk about injuries a lot on this show. We have other medical doctors that cover things for us, and I think there's an interesting tie there between what Dr. Williams is doing and some of the research and things that we've covered on the show, and how that could lead to injuries, and it's not really maybe as simple as we're trying to make it here. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here in studio with Dr. Michael Williams, we're talking about the body and mental and physical health here. And I want to I think there's an interesting tie to sports, because followers of the show know that probably one of our most common guests is Dr. Jimmy Liao, who comes on and analyzes football injuries for us. But one of the things, one of the reasons I'm interested in the injuries is because I think injuries explain more than we give them credit for, one on the field and off. We just go, oh, well, this player didn't make the catch, or he couldn't run as fast, or he couldn't stay up in coverage. Well, sometimes injuries are the cause of that. I don't think fans like that as an explanation, but I think it's a very fair one. If you have some tightness or some issues or an injury, and the fact that you can't, and you normally have 4.4 speed, but you slow down to 4.5, and you're guarding a guy that's 4.3, it's going to be tough to keep up with him if he's totally healthy. So that is a factor. But one of the reasons I've gotten into this myself is because I've tried to look for this root cause that Dr. Williams tries to address, because one of the things that I've gone through in my journey is I've had an Achilles injury and a calf injury on the same leg, and I started wearing flat shoes because I looked into the shoes that were zero drop, basically kind of identifying the fact that, okay, over evolution, we have been the same. We've been flat-footed, but now we're putting the heel up a little bit, and that's anti to what it's been for thousands of years. We always walked flat-footed when we didn't have any shoes, and then the shoes were flat. And in the 70s, when Dr. J and those guys were wearing the Converse high tops that were flat, they didn't have as many injuries. So I brought this up with Dr. Williams, and he said, well, yeah, that could play part of it, but also I want you to kind of explain what you told me about how there's other things that have happened since that time frame, specifically with how we've changed our diets and then the type of foods and how we process foods here in the States.
Right. So maybe before that, let's just touch back on the idea of stress. The way I define it is that stress is an energy deficiency. So whenever the body is asked to do something and it doesn't have enough energy to do it, stress is the result. And so what we're always looking for is where is the body being asked to supply energy, and why can't it supply enough? So then we take that a little further and we say, well, what are the reactions? What are some of the things that happen if the body doesn't have enough energy? Well, the first thing it does when the body is under stress, and it doesn't matter if it's mechanical, emotional, or nutritional, any of those three, the body is under stress, it tightens. If it is under stress for the entire body, the whole body is going to tighten. If it is under a specific form of stress, then specific areas are going to get tight. So, for example, if your kidneys are having a hard time, now this is not disease, this is a struggle. If the kidneys are struggling, then the lower back is going to get tight. A lot of times when I see patients with low back pain, they have a kidney issue that is kind of starting to show up a little bit. So one of the things that I was talking about with this idea of tightness is that if you have a disruption in the gut, specifically in the bowel, it will create tightness in the bottom of the foot. So if you have an unbalanced digestive system, then the bottoms of your feet can potentially be tight. If that tightness is in the bottom of the foot and you try to perform athletically, the chances of there being tension on the Achilles tendon go up, and then we start to see the potential for injury go up as a result. The other thing I was thinking about since we talked about that is that another place, the calf, is a place that can get tight if there is a hormonal disruption. And so I think a lot of things that people are doing now, especially when you look at the different supplements people are taking, they have the potential, and men and women have the potential to disrupt their hormonal system. That creates some tension in the calf, and that also could be tugging on the Achilles tendon. So we could see a potential for injuries start to go up from that as well.
I think that's an interesting point to make, because it makes me think of one of the discussions I had with Dr. Liao, who we talked about football injuries with, is we were talking about, it was when the Lions had the rash of injuries last year, and I think people want to go to try to explain something. They want to go to kind of the simplest. Okay, well, let's see, what's the turf? What are they run? First it's contact, and then if you don't have the contact, okay, well, what do we do with non-contact injuries? We know how to diagnose. Okay, well, a guy got his arm pinned between himself and somebody else. Alex Anzalone had the Lions linebacker last year, and he broke his arm. Sure. That doesn't take a doctor.
That would be a mechanical source of injury for sure. Same thing with Aiden Hutchinson and his leg. That was a mechanical trauma to the body that would fall into the mechanical sources of injury. That
leg whip has been responsible for a couple things. He hit McNeil with that the year before too. So yeah, those things are more obvious. Then they wanted to go into, okay, because I even broke this down on one of the shows, like artificial turf versus grass, and obviously the footwear is usually pretty uniform, but the part that we're taking out of this is the part that you're talking about, which is we can't speak to how these people are handling their nutrition. I remember Terrell Owens famously, who was always in great shape. He could run a 4.40, 6'5", great receiver, six-pack abs. He ate McDonald's every day, and I'm sure when he was younger that probably was okay because the system was able to keep up with it. But then he picked up more injuries as his career went on, even though his physical prowess was still there, but he clearly wasn't getting the proper nutrition with that.
Sure. Yeah. And that's not only is it critical to make sure you're eating the right things, but to be able to identify, am I digesting it, absorbing it, using it correctly, and able to get rid of it when I'm done with it? Because in any of those circumstances, if your body can't do it well, then we're back to that idea of stress, because there's more being asked of the body than what it can handle. And then there's going to be a tightness that develops. And so when we can identify where that tightness is, we can start to trace that backward and narrow down the place in the body that is disrupted and out of balance. Because if the body is out of balance and you're trying to compete, then one of two things has to happen. You either lose performance or you get injured. And we see it over and over and over again. So that's where you say, I used to be able to run a 4.4 or a 4.40, is that right?
Right. Yep.
and now I can't. And well, why is that? And so we look at, well, where did the performance go? Why are we not able to match what we were before?
I was more at like a 6.4. My 40 was never a 4.4. It didn't matter how good my nutrition was, so that wouldn't have worked for me. But no, this stuff we've talked about this with another guest on the show, Zach Center, because he has a nutrition and workout outfit, and he talks about how like he was kind of a practice squad guy that made the team, was like the back end of the roster, made it onto the roster. That guy, those margins are so important, like finding that, because he might not have that natural physical prowess, the natural athleticism that some of the other guys have that he's competing against. So he's got to find where those micro advantages are. So he's a sports agent now, but this is one of the things that he's really plugged into with his kids that he now advises as an agent. He says, hey, I'll help you work out your deals and all that, but we got to get you a better deal. If we can get you slightly better numbers at the combine, slightly better performance by just tweaking your diet, that's going to make a big difference. And to a 22-year-old that might be swinging through the Taco Bell line at 1 o'clock in the morning, that could actually make a huge difference, because you can get away with more of that stuff when you're younger, but as you get older, as your career draws on, as you get more pressure on yourself, more stress, then it's harder to maintain that same type of performance, like you're saying.
Right, yeah. And one of the things that I find is missed a lot in nutrition is the idea of digestion. And so we tend to assume that if you put the right things into the body knows what to do with it and is capable of doing that. And I find a lot of times that that's not the case. It's going to be better that if you are putting the right things in, but poorly digested food is going to be poorly digested food no matter where it's coming from. And poorly digested food creates a lot of struggle for the body because it can't extract the right amount of energy from it, and it leaves excess amounts of waste that the body has to deal with. And over time, those two things start to combine to be low energy and not feeling good because you've got too much waste and not enough energy to be able to deal with it.
And then I'm sure that's a compounding factor, because then that's one thing I've always focused on. It's like if you eat worse, then you feel bad, and then you're going to eat worse because it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to satiate this craving, or I don't feel good enough to make myself a salad, or what have you. So we're going to take another break, but I'm going to have Dr. Williams. I'm sure there's some interest in his services with all the talking we're doing about these different things, because this is kind of how I found him. I said, hey, like, I'm doing all right. I'm doing better than I have been. I have a shoulder issue where it's a permanently separated shoulder that didn't really get fixed. Can you help me with this? And the nice thing about his services is they apply to a lot of people. It's not just, okay, I have a problem with my back, or if I feel tightness with my back. It's really applicable in a lot of situations. So I want him to take us through the different processes and how his practice works. So we'll take a quick break and come back and talk about that. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Being joined here by Dr. Michael Williams of Williams Chiropractic. He's taking us through a lot of root causes of things, because I think that's kind of, if I didn't start this journey with him until after I started the show, but if I would have, I think I would have thought of the parallels to the show, because we don't often like to just look at the result. Okay, well, he dropped the ball on 3rd and 7, and so he stinks. That to me is pretty lazy radio. It happens a lot. We won't name any names, but it does happen. It's a popular sports radio trope. But really, all these things come down to a lot of different factors, and so it's always good to get to your peak performance, whether you're just a fan or somebody trying to live their everyday life, or you're an athlete. Dr. Williams treats both. So just want to have you kind of outline the process for people that are interested, and then we'll be able to direct them to the resources available at the end of the interview here.
Yeah, great. So what I start with is sort of an interview consultation process. And so the idea there is that we want to know what are the things that are happening, and then that's where I can start to identify a little bit what are we into here. Is this a mechanical issue? Is it a nutritional issue? Is it more on the thought side and the emotional side of things? So we start with that, and then what I do, I run a very specialized test. It's called an integrated urinalysis panel. It's a 24-hour test where what we're looking at is the way the body is balancing itself. So I call it a full body audit, because we really get a ton of valuable information from that, and in ways that I don't know of another way to get it. So we're looking at what does the body have too much of that is trying to dump and get rid of, and what does it not have enough of that is trying to hang on to, because those become critical things when we're talking about how the body heals. Because if it doesn't have enough of the raw materials to heal with, it's not going to be able to. And if it can't get things out well enough, then it's not going to heal either. So when we want to get the body back to performance, we've got to look at that. And so we start with that urinalysis panel, and that's where I can start to see all of the ins and outs of digestion and elimination. We can look at that process from what you eat to what the body does with it and how it ends up at the end. And from that, we can say, all right, you're not digesting food well, and not just you're not digesting food, but we can break it down even more than that and specifically look at how well we're digesting protein, how well we're digesting carbohydrates, how well we're digesting fats, and what the consequences of poor digestion of any of those three could be inside of the body. And then we see the elimination side to be able to see, well, okay, if we're able to break it down, what are we able to do with it after that? And so from that, then we get a really good window at the way the body is struggling and where to start. And then we can move from there into the treatment phase where we're identifying the effects of some of those things in the body. We know then where the problems might have originated, but what did it really do, and how do we turn that around so the body can start to heal itself and get back to normal?
This was an interesting part of the process for me because I've gotten better about my intake over the last few years here, but you always need tweaks. And as a former weightlifter, former power lifter, that this made sense to me because it was more kind of like on the macro side of things where you're taking, okay, well, this is a protein, this is a carb, this is a fat. And it's kind of like that, but unless you're tracking it to that degree, and really arguably even if you are tracking it to that degree, there's two phases of this. You're tracking the intake, but you're using labels and you're using whatever's posted, and you might not have the competency to take in what you need to understand that because you're not a professional. Other than you, we're not really professional nutritionists or have degrees in this, and so you're trying to take that in, but really that's all somewhat irrelevant because it's like you can take in whatever you want, but it matters what the body does with it.
Right. If you don't put your paycheck into the bank, your bank account's never going to show any difference. And so if you can't cash those checks, then you're going to stay poor. And that's what the body does if you're not able to digest that food. I remember the first time I ran one of those urine panels on myself. I was working with one of my mentors at the time, and he looked at the results and he said to me, "You're protein deficient." And I said, "Your test is broken." I said, "Nobody eats more meat than I do," and he said, you are looking at this from a consumption standpoint, not from a digestion standpoint. It's not how much you consume, it's how much you're able to digest. So another one of my mentors used to say that saying that you are what you eat. He said that's wrong. He said you are what you're able to digest. And so I always kind of remember that because when we're looking at some of these problems, that's really where it starts. And that's where I see a lot of people who have changed their diet and done a lot of the right things, but they've missed that digestive component. And so for them, it's just a matter of making sure that they're digesting the good things that they're eating, and then everything starts to turn around for them.
I had a good example of this when we went through this because I have been eating better, but one of the things I was leaning heavily on were egg whites because I thought, okay, I'll reduce the cholesterol and I eat a lot of eggs, but I'll go with the egg whites. I'm getting a lot of protein here. But basically what you told me when we went through the test or even before we even got to the test is, hey, that's not really that it may say something on the label, but that's not really how it's going down.
Eggs are best eaten as the whole package, the whites and the yolks all together, because our bodies need everything that's in there. The yolks have a lot of things that when combined with the whites really give us the benefit. If we're just consuming the whites, sometimes we don't get all of the good nutritional benefits out of an egg that we might otherwise.
So we're coming up to the holidays. I feel like this is a good time to talk about this a little bit because we got Thanksgiving coming up. We got Christmas coming up. People are probably thinking a little doom and gloom here. They're saying, okay, these two are trying to lecture me about my nutrition and my food. So what advice do you have for people going into the holidays here? Hopefully you get some people consulting you, but I like that it's a little bit more, it plans for everyday life, your approach. It's not, you can't never have, a dessert or whatever, but there's flexibility here.
Yeah. Well, just remember that idea that life is about balance, and none of us are asked to be perfect all the time, thankfully, but we also can't push the limits and not expect the body to react. If we push it too far in any one direction, it's going to react negatively. So what we have to do is find the balance. So I usually break things down, especially when we're talking about food, in in pretty simple terms, and I have some categories that I break it down into. There are builders, there are eliminators, there are congestors, and there are lubricators. So in order to find the balance, what we want to do is kind of look at the body and say, well, is it running too fast or running too slow? Am I stuck in some way, or does it seem like things are running out too fast? And if for a lot of people, they eat too many of the congestors. Those are going to be the grains, the breads, the sugars, the sweets, all of the stuff that we really like, the things that are everywhere at this time of year. And it ends up kind of plugging the body up because they're congestors and they're going to do exactly what their name suggests. So in that case, to balance that out, you probably want to eat more on the eliminators. Eliminators are going to be the fresh fruits and vegetables that are going to help open up the pathways of elimination so that the body starts to be able to clean itself a little better. So if you find that you are over-consuming some of those congestors, look to the eliminators in order to balance it. And then the builders, those are the protein sources. My general rule is that if it runs, swims, or flies, that's a protein. And then you can mix in some other things that beans and things like that have some protein in them as well. But find the protein because the body's not going to do well if it's not being built up in some way. So give it a little bit of the builders every day. Find the eliminators, be careful with the congestors, and then the last one's the lubricators. That's the oils, greases, and fats that help keep everything running smoothly. So just use those as you need to, and find the balance through the holidays, and then don't try to make that make it the exception rather than the rule.
Don't take your pumpkin pie and throw it. That's not what he means by flies. That doesn't work. He's talking about birds, chickens, things, the turkeys, things like that.
It's all in the application of the rules, right?
Well, we're going to balance this too, because one of the things I'm kicking around, because we are going to do a Thanksgiving show, and one of the things I'm kicking around is doing some sort of Thanksgiving draft where we take all the people involved in that individual show and we basically draft like, okay, we're going to make our Thanksgiving meal here with a main, a couple of sides, a dessert. So we'll balance out, kind of the healthy coverage, and then we'll indulge in that one meal, and then we'll get back on track there. But for people that are trying to get back on track, whether it is in the holidays to try to kind of beat that, because this always happens, we're cyclical as people. We get into the holiday cycle, and then we hit the new year and we say, okay, now we're going to do it. But maybe now is the time. Maybe it's time to get ahead of it, or maybe do it then. But tell people where to find you and how to initiate the process if they're interested in your services.
The easiest way is to go to the website, williamschiropracticgr.com. From there, you can see a little breakdown of everything that we talked about, the way I do things, the way I practice, describes the adjusting techniques that I use, how I enable the brain to be able to coordinate function with the body. And then there's also a really easy scheduling app that you can link to on the website, so you can figure out what works best for your schedule. If phone is more your style, you'd rather call 616-344-4727. Rings up to the front desk, and they'll be able to help you get things set up there too.
I'd really recommend the services. It's helped me out a lot because it's just nice to have some additional help. We're all trying our best here with our help, but sometimes you just need some direction from somebody that can actually see the hard data. I'm kind of a data-driven person. I'm a finance person. We look at the data with all these sports and things. So it's nice to have data on yourself to then drive decision-making rather than kind of flying blind and saying, oh, well, yeah, okay, well, I think this is right. It's nice to have that data. So be sure to check out Dr. Williams. He's done great for me, and we'll continue to update things too as we go. May have him on in the new year to kind of talk about New Year's things and New Year's resolutions and all of that. But appreciate you joining the show and educating us on nutrition and health. And hopefully we are able to send some people your way, because you can help a lot of people with this information here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Definitely. We'll have you back on again, and be sure to hear the ads and stuff, and I'll be doing a weekly plug and updating everybody on my journey with it. But we appreciate Dr. Williams coming in studio and joining us. We're going to turn our attention to the Pistons here because they're red hot. Blake Silverman's going to join us. He told me he's getting the kiddo to bed, and now he'll be able to talk some Pistons here. Hopefully we won't get too loud. But stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to bring on this next guest here, Blake Silverman. He's one of our favorites for Pistons coverage, and now that we have more room on this show, we're able to cover the Pistons every week, which is great this season, Blake, because even though we had high hopes, I can't imagine that you had them at a 9-game win streak if I told you that guys like Dennis Jenkins, Javonte Green, and others were going to be in the starting lineup and be key contributors to this team here.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I mean, you see the injury reports night in and night out, and you're just like, okay, tonight's the night that the streak ends. It was nice while it lasted, and somehow these guys keep finding ways to win. I mean, they're playing right now as we talk, and they're playing a pretty bad Indiana team. So hopefully the win streak can continue. But yeah, I mean, 11-2, the top of the Eastern Conference. Who could have thought that would have happened?
I actually really like this lineup that they have because I'm big on the Pistons. I cover them often. I watch the games. I watch the Summer League games. I watch the preseason games. I watch pretty much every game that they have. I watch a lot of G League games. So I'm familiar with the back end of this roster more than most, not you, but more than most. And so the idea that guys like Dennis Jenkins are getting significant minutes, and some of the others, Smith has been thrown in there, but other guys from the G League team, some of these back end guys on their roster, it shows the depth of the roster, which is very important as the season wears on. And there's part of me, because obviously they're winning, so that there's nothing to really counterbalance, hey, you're winning with this lineup. But the fact that they're able to rest all of these guys and see what these backups are able to do, that's going to be great for the minute count for the starters, because even though they're a young team, as a Pistons fan, I always think of that Flip Saunders era of the Pistons where he won like 60 games in the regular season, but he was burning those guys out, and they were mostly veterans at that point, and they did great during the regular season, but they didn't really make it to the playoffs. And that's tough. You're working on games 83 and above, and then plus the preseason. So you're basically into the 90s at that point when you start the playoffs. And especially for veteran players, it's tough. But if you can get these guys, get their minute count down during the actual game, 30 minutes versus 40 minutes, because before these injuries, these minute counts were creeping up. They had a couple overtime games. Cade was doing 40 minutes in some of those games, and that's going to take a toll even on a young guy. So I like that they're resting, and we're seeing like, hey, we've got a competent small forward fill-in Javonte Green that's able to give some hustle minutes. Dennis Jenkins may be answering some of the questions of, well, hey, we need a backup ball handler. Well, apparently they have a backup ball handler on the team.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, and what you mentioned about Flip Saunders, I mean, it's kind of similar to what we've seen in recent years with the Tom Thibodeau Knicks teams. And, I mean, he's not there anymore, but you saw they obviously beat the Pistons in the playoffs last year, but they're one of those teams that is trying to take the next step, and maybe that plays a part into it. So, obviously, I mean, I don't know anything, but personally, I think that Cade was probably ready to return to the lineup tonight against Indiana, but being the fact that it is a 1-12 basketball team and there's some better teams coming up, maybe they just gave them one more night here. And yeah, I think it's important to be able to find ways to win games when you're missing your top guys. I mean, with how Cade came out of the gate this year, I thought if they don't have him in the lineup, it's really going to be tough to win because everything was going through him. And I mean, Jalen Duren's been incredible too, but a lot of that has been funneled through Cade and created by Cade. But Duren, when he's been out there without Cade, even tonight, he's found ways to still do what he does. And Dennis Jenkins, like you mentioned, has answered a lot of questions. So they're just, I mean, I know it's cliche, but they're just a gritty group. And I really wouldn't have thought that they would be competing in games when they had a starting lineup of Wendell Moore Jr. and Dennis Jenkins and Javonte Green's getting a ton of minutes. So, yeah, all credit to these guys and credit to the front office, too, for making some of those impactful signings, like getting Javonte Green on a cheap deal pretty close to the regular season starting.
The fact that that guy is essentially like your 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th guy on this team is amazing, because he really has given them good quality minutes. You could gripe about maybe the shooting percentage or what have you, but a guy in that position, I was talking about this earlier today, because I've talked with people that maybe haven't been as happy with his play, but I look at him as like a Kindle Vildor for the Lions. He was a very polarizing player for the Lions. Cornerback, started as like the 5th or 6th cornerback, and then by the end of the season, he ended up being basically their number 2 cornerback 2 seasons in a row. This is kind of how I look at Javonte Green. He's a great backup, and in brief duty, he can kind of fill in and do some of these hustle things. And I feel like this is a very important and underrated role in the NBA too. We're not seeing it as a need as much for the Pistons, but I think it will be one, because Thompson kind of fills this role as a young guy, the defensive stalwart that is able to basically make a big impact without touching the ball a whole lot. He doesn't necessarily have to deal with the ball much to make a big impact on the game, but that small forward wing player that you can put on the opposing team's best player and is flexible to guard 1 through 5 or pretty close to that is very important. But a lot of times that guy, sometimes it's a Thompson or somebody that's a little bit more high profile and is a big prospect. And sometimes it's Derek Jones or Javonte Green. Like they come in different iterations, but you need multiple guys like that on your team that don't want the ball, don't really expect the ball. They just expect to get out there, hustle, and make the game tough for the opposing team, because with basketball, this is more true than really any other game. There's only one ball. Only one person can be touching the ball at the same time. So if you've got guys out there that aren't ball dominant and don't need it, that's an advantage, especially when you got a guy like Cade that wants to spread it all around.
Yeah. And what you mentioned about those players, like coming from a whole different types of iterations, like that position really are the type of players that get paid those massive contracts in the NBA. They're always at the top of every draft board because they're hard to get. And once the team gets one, they commit to them for a long time and pay them a lot of money. And Javonte Green obviously isn't necessarily a high-level wing player, but he's certainly been impactful on the rotation, and especially for the short-term deal at the price tag that the Pistons got him. Like, when they made that signing, I figured it was last man on the roster, like a depth piece, but he was involved in the rotation pretty immediately, even if it was on short minutes. And then with all these injury woes, especially with his position, Tobias Harris missing some time, he's been great. And like you said, he's not a high maintenance player by any means. So that's been one of the wins of this win streak, alongside I think the other clear one is Dennis Jenkins as well.
That's what I was going to ask you, is who else has stuck out to you, because I think there's a lot of candidates. I'm looking at the box score right now, and they're playing great, by the way, during our interview. So we got to keep this up. Good thing we got another segment here with Blake. But I mean, Duran, obviously this will be. I was thinking about this when we were talking about the different lineups. They're going to be one of these teams that by the end of the season, they're going to have the number of iterations that they will have tried in 82 games is going to be enormous, because of as far as starting lineups go because of how many injuries they've had. But now this is another different one, and I think I didn't see what the starting lineup was, but I assume by who's played that they went with the double big in Stewart and Duran, and then paired Jenkins, I would assume Robinson, and then did did Green start at small forward or what? Or did Moore?
Holland
Ron
actually
Holland. Okay.
started, but he it looks like he went out early. So yeah, I'm not sure what really happened there. I turned on the game like midway through the first quarter, so Javonte Green has got on a lot of those minutes. So Ron is he's still in. I apologize.
I think he just got put back in.
Changing the box scores is really messing with us all.
Yeah, I think he just got put back in. So I think you were. It looked like that's why I wasn't sure if he had started, because it doesn't look like he was out there very very long. But he must have had that part of the rotation and then gotten back in here. But yeah, this is. You don't have Cade to dish the ball to Stewart and Duran, but it looks like Duran's getting his own. I mean, he's 6 of 7, and he's being just as dominant. His emergence during this season, because this is a key season for him and the team. Obviously, they decided not to re-sign him yet, and he's proving that he's one of the important pieces of their future, especially given the fact that I feel like we talk about this with Dan Campbell a lot, but it happens with a lot of people in sports, how you make him one thing. I feel like because he's a big guy and because he's muscular and he's got that huge frame, people say, oh, well, he's a rebounder, back to the basket scorer, he's down low, but he's got a better handle than you think. He's a better passer than you think. And it seems like that shooting touch is getting better because you're seeing it at the line so far this year.
Yeah, and that's been a big improvement, and he's got to the line a ton, and he actually made a mid-range jumper in the game against Indiana tonight. So, I mean, he obviously has a lot more opportunity out there right now, where the offense is with Cade out. It's like, okay, whoever's going, continue to go. But I mean, the way Duran's played so far this season, it's really like, if he keeps it up, he should be in the All-Star game as a reserve. We'll see if that happens, but just everything he does offensively, I mean, I still think he has a little ways to go as a defender, but he's looked better there too. But yeah, I don't think, like, it was a question maybe on the future for him in terms of the extension before this year, but I think the front office is getting some answers pretty quickly.
It's funny because heading into the season, I would say I was slightly more confident about Ivy given his development before the injury last year than Duran, as long as he came back healthy. Then he had the issue with the knee surgery and everything. I know he's gotten active, so we'll see what happens there, but I'm curious what those contracts are going to look like for both of them. Obviously, Duran is playing his way into a big contract, but this is part of the strategy with these young cores, is making sure to get these draft picks right and then building around the young cores. So we'll talk about that and how we see the future here with the top team in the East at the time here. So come back with us with Blake Silverman of SI and Pistons Pin Down. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Blake Silverman, talking some Pistons. Blake, I try not to overreact either way when teams are losing or when they're winning, but at the beginning of the season, the East was wide open, and there was a lot made of different moves that were made by other teams in the East, because obviously you have Indiana, who, as you referenced, is one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference, mainly because of the injury toll that they've had, especially to Halliburton. And then you've got Boston dealing with kind of clearing house a little bit, and then the injury to Tatum. So a couple of the powers had been taken out, and so now you're left with, okay, well, Cleveland's still pretty strong, and then Orlando made moves, so people were high on them. And I did think, not just because we're in the market, but I did think that Detroit was kind of overlooked because they didn't make the splashy move. But I was one of the few people, I think, coming out kind of against the Kevin Durant trade for the Rockets at the beginning of the season. This was one of the things that I wanted to watch because the teams are kind of similar. They built young cores. They have a good coach that's establishing culture there and working well with this young core. They both have a Thompson twin for that matter, and the young cores, but they've gone different directions now. The Rockets have officially taken their swing. They got rid of part of their young core to then bring in an unquestioned first ballot Hall of Famer, but one that is aging, and I don't know how well he fits on that team. We'll see as the season goes on, and we'll see what happens, but I like the Pistons strategy better. I think it's more sustainable, but I'm curious what you thought kind of at the beginning of the season, where you thought they would be, and obviously compared to where they are now, because they're on top of the East with a team that's not even near complete, and they're still atop the East, and they're still dominating. So that has to buoy your spirits for the season here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I agree that I did think the East was wide open with everything that happened to Boston and the Halliburton injury. But even with that being the case, like, I thought there was room for the Pistons to be in a similar spot to what they were last year. But I don't know, like, they won 3 times as many games as they won the season before. That it's not possible for that to happen again, obviously. But when you do that, I think it's sort of difficult to take that next step. But in the East, we've seen not random teams, but teams just make a run in the playoffs seemingly out of nowhere. Like, I remember what Trae Young in Atlanta did a few years ago. So I was not expecting the Pistons to make a big trade and really go for it this year, which they didn't. I mean, the good news is if you are looking for them to make that type of deal, they're still in prime position to do it with all their draft picks they own and some interesting young players if they want to deal any of them. But yeah, overall, I think with this 11-2 start, the sky's the limit. I don't want to overreact either, but in a wide open Eastern Conference, I mean, anything can happen. And I would not be surprised, honestly, if the Pistons made a run similar to that Hawks run of a few years ago to the Eastern Conference Finals or something like that, or at least winning a playoff series, I think would be a huge win for this franchise.
That's really the next step, because like you said, they faced the Knicks last year. They were close. They didn't have Stewart. They were very close to winning that series, but now the next step would be to win a series. But man, depending on how this breaks out, it's not illogical to think that they could go farther than that, especially because, I mean, it has to be emphasized how far away from complete this team is right now. They've had all the injuries. Ivy and Thompson still have not played together. Now they're without both of them. They haven't played together healthy the last 2 years, and now they're without both of them and Cade and everybody else. And like you said, Cade's injury is probably just more, okay, let's make sure to get him as much rest as we can. We think we can get this one against the Pacers. We got a tough stretch coming up. But when you look at the other teams here, there's not a lot of teams in the East where they feel like big threats. I think Cleveland is one of them, and that seems like a very natural rivalry. It's Bickerstaff's former team. It's a double big lineup that could brawl a little bit with the Duren and Stewart kind of lineup, and it does match up pretty well. Donovan Mitchell will be tough to contain in that series. They don't have Garland back, so that's something where once he gets back in full form, then they could look even better. But we'll see how they that would be a fun one to see for the Eastern Conference Final. I think is if you could get there, have the Pistons and the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Final. That would be a very interesting storyline, especially with the coaches matching up there.
Yeah, and I mean, we're sort of going back to the 90s a little bit with the Pistons making this step and Cleveland being there and the Knicks being there too. And I mean, Indiana, obviously a down year, but it's right in the same. And I mean, there are some other, like the Hawks are off to a good start and they had a ton of changes in the off season. So they're another team to look out for. And I mean, obviously the Bucks with Giannis as well. You can't count them out, and they might try to make things happen. But yeah, the Pistons and the Cavs, and I mean, it would be a great storyline for JB Bickerstaff to coach against his old team and in a playoff series wherever it is. And I mean, obviously he deserves a ton of credit for the job that he's done there. And I think it's been huge for some of these younger players. Like I think Duren and Ivy, this is the first time they went into a new season with the same coach. So that continuity and everything, I think is huge. And we know all the changes that went down in the front office as well. But yeah, it's really anyone's conference. I mean, I do think that the Knicks and the Cavs are the toughest teams to draw and play a 7-game series with, but anything could happen.
I kind of look at the Knicks. You were right to bring them up as the modern day example of what we were talking about with the Flip Saunders era, kind of overplaying them. I know Thibodeau's not there anymore, but those guys are veterans and they have a lot of minutes on them, and they don't necessarily have an exceptionally deep bench. So I think by the time they hit the playoffs, I could see the wheels falling off for them a little bit, but we'll have to see. That you're right about that lineup. It's a great lineup, and it's very tough with the switchability, the defense, the versatility, the multiple stars. They have a lot of things going for them, but there's a point where that catches up to people. We've seen it with different teams that make deep playoff runs or have a lot of minutes on them. So we'll have to see, but it's fun to have this version of the Pistons because it's a new thing every night, and it's fun every night because they're successful with these lineups. The reinforcements are coming, but I'm curious to understand what you think is going to be kind of a key going forward. Obviously, it's going to be hard to improve on an 11-2 record, but obviously there's some continuity that has to be established because as good as they played, a lot of these guys haven't played together. So that's going to be one of the things that they're going to have to work out is some guys have had increased roles and now they're going to have to decrease their role again for the guy that was ahead of them in the depth chart to come back. And so then you're going to have to operate with those decreased roles, but that doesn't seem like an issue with this current culture that JB and Trajan Langdon have established.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think in terms of moving forward, obviously we're waiting for Cade Cunningham's return. I think it really starts and stops with him. So first and foremost, but another thing I think is just the shooting aspect, like we've seen in prior years and the Troy Weaver years, how just not being able to make any shots was a huge problem and really hindered the rest of the offense. And Trajan Langdon, the new front office, definitely addresses that right out of the gate when they bring in Malik Beasley last year and they signed Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert this year. And I'm not confident Asar Thompson's ever going to develop as a shooter, but Ron Holland seems to be getting a bit better. But that three-point shooting when they lost the opening night against Chicago in the first few games, like that was really what you could look at is where they were lacking. So I don't know if it's as simple as making a deal for another shooter, because I think in the long term, when you have Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson as big pieces of your core, like neither of them are going to be three-point shooters. So how do you address that? I mean, I think they've done an incredible job of it so far with Javonte Green and Dennis Jenkins providing those, and Ron Holland improving, and Duncan Robinson playing really well over this winning streak. But that would be the one thing that I would keep an eye on moving forward, because defensively, I mean, they've honestly been awesome, which is a credit to the whole group.
Well, that was one of the things that I was curious about with the whole, because we're going to try to cover this later on the show in maybe a few weeks, hopefully. But obviously the gambling has been a big talk, and then Chauncey Billups got involved in that because of his involvement in things over there in Portland. But Beasley was the start to that. But when the news all hit, because because of the way things are and news hitting so fast and these reporters getting on things quickly, we can jump to conclusions. And what I tried to remind people with the gambling thing is, hey, remember we did this with Malik Beasley, and then a bunch of news came out that, oh, he was spending his money inappropriately, and oh, he really looked guilty, until they decided, oh, we can't really find anything more. And I think maybe he's got a little time till he's officially cleared, but he's headed there, it seems, and he could be available. So I always wondered if that, it seems like if he came back, if he came back to the NBA, one, it seems like the door would be open in Detroit as long as he was cleared, and two, there's still a fit for him even though they have Robinson, because then that basically means that Robinson kind of replaces Tim Hardaway in a way and improves that shooting, and then you still get Malik Beasley, who, by all evidence that I read and saw, was a great culture fit, obviously had a great season, but he's a guy that I would think would be welcomed back into this locker room.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and I think there's obviously a lot going on behind the scenes there that we don't know about. And I think the Pistons actually did make a move to fill their final roster spot, but those signings are like non-guaranteed deals. So if you wanted to bring in Malik Beasley, you could easily maneuver your way into it. I mean, I don't know what the Pistons think. I think everything Malik Beasley has posted on social media is if and when he makes a return to the NBA, he wants it to be in Detroit. Who knows if that's reciprocated? I mean, I know at least on the floor last year and in the locker room how big he was for everything this team did. So I think the door would be open if everything was okay, but I could also see the team just being like, we don't want to deal with this, because that's a big one, obviously.
Oh yeah, I mean that would be the ideal move for him in a lot of ways, because they have followed the same script as a lot of the Detroit teams. You talked about grit, and that word gets thrown around a lot in Detroit, but there's a reason. We talked about this last week a little bit, how kind of the city emulates the fans, the team emulates the fans, and vice versa, and it kind of goes around in a circle. And there's a reason that these teams end up being gritty, because they're a counterpart to the fans in the city. But a lot of them have followed the same track, which is young core, layer in some cheaper veterans that are culture fits, and then try to improve that and focus on that culture and the next man up and get that core elevated. That's what the Pistons have done. That young core is looking good early on, but you've got a guy that potentially could come off the street, and he's a culture fit because he's already been in your locker room.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that's the easy part of it. Obviously, you need to find where those minutes are going to come from. I mean, I think if he's on this roster, then you're going to find minutes for him. Like, he would have led the league in 3-pointers last year if Anthony Edwards didn't take like 20 of them in his last game of the regular season. So you find room for that. I think just everything outside of basketball is really what ties this one up. So I'm not holding my breath per se, but if and when he is able to come back, I think it definitely could be with this group. And I think he would certainly be all bought in. And if we do see a signing and he rejoins, like, you have to know that the team clearly wanted him back too, because of everything he did last year.
Being in a position to not be sure where the minutes would come from for Malik Beasley with the amount of injuries is amazing. You're absolutely right about the point, but but I think that's a great point to kind of end on, because it's like, hey, this is where we're at. You're right that they would find minutes for him, but they've improved the roster and elevated things even without him. So if he did come, he would probably be a fit and they would find minutes for him. But yeah, they're in great shape without him. So we'll have to see how that goes. But we appreciate you joining the show. We appreciate you giving us your insights. We'll look forward to having you back on as the season progresses, but make sure people can figure out where to follow you here, both on the Pistons side of things and the SI side of things.
Yeah. Follow me on any social at Blake Silverman, and you can find my written work on SI.com, doing a bunch of stuff not limited to just the Pistons or even basketball. So, feel free to check it out, and thanks for having me on again. Really enjoyed it.
Always. Yeah, he's got great stuff on SI. Like Blake said, there's a lot of non-Piston stuff on there. He did a good job covering kind of the recent stuff with the cable stuff with YouTube TV and Disney, because that stuff is always intriguing. That's too confusing for me, though, Blake. I can't even follow all that. There's too many services.
Me too, honestly. I'm not a YouTube TV customer, so I was happy I wasn't involved in that.
I mean, it'd be nice if we had one place where all the stations could just be all under one package. Oh wait, we had that before, I guess. But it's funny how that's all spread out now. But yeah, appreciate you being on the show, and we'll look forward to having you back on here soon.
Yeah, thanks again. Really had a good time.
Thanks, Blake. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks to Blake Silverman. Appreciate him joining us. And we're going to turn our attention to hockey here, because that's our other kind of main segment with this new iteration of the show. And they've been doing pretty well here, too. They're always exciting. They keep it exciting. They don't let you really be too comfortable with what the score is or where they're at, because they keep it pretty exciting. But we'll talk to Ansar Khan of MLive about his thoughts on the Red Wings season so far. He's been covering the market for, I think, like 35 years or something like that. So long-standing beat writer on the market. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to bring on this next guest. We were talking about him a little bit in the break. He's been on the scene for a long time. We try to get a lot of variety here on the Red Wings coverage now that we're covering them every week for this season, now that we moved the football content over to the Shane Graham show. But happy to bring on Ansar Khan of MLive. And I don't want to reveal your age here, but you've been on the beat for a long time here. How long have you been covering? I think it's since 1987.
Not quite that long, but yeah, I've been. In fact, I just had my 25th anniversary at MLive last month, and before that, I covered them for several years with the Oakland Press.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So we're glad to get your takes on everything here. It's great writing. And make sure to go to mlive.com and follow them here. I think I'm going to start here. I've watched all the games, and they're a fun team to watch. They're, as long as your blood pressure is okay, because you gotta make sure to keep it together while you're watching them, because they never make you feel too comfortable, no matter what if they're behind or if they're ahead. And we saw that in the overtime loss a couple games ago. But what do you make of the last game here? It was funny to me. I actually got out of the coverage because I was watching the Lions game at the same time, and then it was revealed to me that there was actually a fight after I ditched out of the game. So are we making too big of a deal about defending the net here? I want to get your take on the whole situation with Jonathan Quick and the Appleton shot just after the horn.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, Quick's a bit of a hothead. I think he overreacted. Appleton just, the game was over. A couple seconds after the buzzer, shot it into the open net. Quick, who was, of course, on the bench for the extra skater, didn't like it and charged out there and, went after him. I just think he overreacted. It wasn't a big deal. It shouldn't have been a big deal. It's not like situations you see where a player might, fire a puck at a goalie like just a split second or so after the whistle blows during play, and of course that always leads to a scrum.
Yeah, I get it if it's something where, okay, they might not be ready for it, and then you're firing the puck at him, and then he's got to play that so it doesn't hit him in the wrong spot or what have you. But he wasn't even in the game. He had obviously been pulled so that they could try to get the equalizer. But the fact, because I harp on fans sometimes for this same kind of thing, that the game is slower for us. We see it from a different perspective because you got all the TV angles. You can see things in slow motion, and a lot of these people are making split-second decisions. But that's basically what Quick is getting mad about. I mean, Appleton hit that. He went into the swing as time was expiring. It's not like he waited a minute and then decided, okay, I'm going to try to hit it into this goal. It was as time was expiring and he was trying to ensure that they get the win. I didn't really think that there was anything poor from like a sportsmanship standpoint there.
Yeah, no, exactly. I agree with you. Quick obviously, took exception to it. Felt Appleton, was trying to show him up or trying to show the team up, but I didn't see that as being the case at all.
Quick is an apt name for his temper. Apparently, it also is his last name and a good name for his temper. But I'm curious what you think of this team so far here, because they're an intriguing team for me. Obviously, we've gotten to see some young guys in there now. Danielson's in the mix, and you've got some young guys that are giving early returns. Finney has been a key name here, but I'm curious what you've thought of the season so far, since you have been on the beat for a long time. Obviously, this current arc has been going for a long time. The fans are getting a little bit restless with the Iser plan and all of that, but he had to fill the cupboards back up. They were pretty empty. Now there's a lot of young guys. They're getting everybody slotted in, and I have to imagine you've been pretty happy with the start to the season relative to maybe what we thought, given kind of the relatively minor off-season moves.
Yeah, it is a difficult team to read. They've had highs and lows. The low being the season opener, a terrible performance against the Canadians, and then that Buffalo collapse on Saturday night. And they've also had 5-game winning streak and some highs. It was very difficult to read, to gauge exactly what this team is. But I do think that unlike previous teams, clearly there's a shift in philosophy here, in that they started out the season having 3 rookies on the season opening roster. When it looked like before training camp that none of them were going to make it, they forced their way into the roster. They gave them a chance. 2 of them are still here. Brandt Nygaard obviously needs some seasoning in Grand Rapids. They brought up Nate Danielson. Now they're going to give him a look too. He's been pretty quiet, so they'll see over the next few games whether they want him to stick around or whether they're going to send him back to get more development time. But I think it's good that they are giving these young players a chance, because it just wasn't working the old way. Just continuing to trot out the veterans who are underperforming. They need to see what these kids can do, and they're seeing it with Finney. They're seeing it with Standing Pellica, and now Danielson's going to get a chance. And I suspect when Carter Mazer returns from his injury in Grand Rapids, that he'll soon be up as well. So it's a different mindset from the front office, and it shows that their patience is wearing thin with the old method of just letting these kids overwrite while some veterans underperform up here.
I think there's a lot of reason for hope. You highlighted some of them because, like you said, you had to do something a little bit different, and they took a couple different approaches there. They tried to solidify the goalie situation, and it's amazing to me that obviously they've been in different situations, but that Talbot has been really the more rock solid goalie, but the fact that they have more of a 1A and 1B, whichever one you consider Talbot or Gibson, that's a solid veteran combo to then oversee whatever the transition is to the young guys. Then you've got those young guys basically at all positions throughout the system. You've highlighted some of them, and then you also acquired some other guys. Gibson was the guy that everybody was talking about in the offseason, but you've got all these other guys that have come in. Appleton's one of them, who we've talked about in the interview so far. But there are several guys that were cheap additions, but they also fit better than some of the existing veterans that then got deployed down to Grand Rapids. And you have to imagine that having those guys in Grand Rapids will improve kind of the evenness of the system to a degree, because, hey, maybe they're not cutting it up at the Red Wings level, and maybe they did need to be moved on from, but at the same time, they're probably helping guys down in Grand Rapids that we may even see in the course of the season, to your point.
Yeah, for sure. They sent veterans, Eric Gustafson and Justin Hall down right at the start of the season. When Stanley Pellica was a surprise addition to the roster, making it in training camp. To your point about the goalies, it is a little bit surprising that Talbot has kind of emerged in the early going here as he's having a better season right now. Gibson really needs to find more consistency. And I think when they started the season, they kind of envisioned Gibson as being a workhorse, playing maybe like a 50-30 split in terms of starts. But right now, the way it's going, almost probably if Talbot continues to win, he's 7-2, they're going to have to basically alternate. I'm sure they would like to play Gibson 2 out of every 3 games, because Talbot's the second oldest goalie in the league, and they don't want to overwork him. Interestingly, Quick is actually the oldest goalie in the league. So the 2 oldest faced off, opposed each other twice this season. But anyway, it is a concern because of Talbot's age and Gibson coming off that injury last season. And there was a bit of a quandary. They were fortunate that Gibson's injury over the weekend wasn't serious at all, and was able to come back the next game, because both of their goalies in Grand Rapids, Kosa and Postava, are out with injuries, so they would have had a problem there. But they definitely need some help and some depth throughout the organization in that.
You make a good point about the timing of that, because part of me, when you talk about some of these depth things and especially the young guys, that is where now they have a little bit of a log jam to a degree. They've got 2 goalies playing well in Grand Rapids, like you said. They've got one performing very well in college. He's a little bit away, but they've got a lot of good goalies in their system here. And so part of you would say, okay, well, maybe the fact that Gibson might have to take an early season injury, or Talbot, because he's on the older side, have to take a few games off, then you could maybe shuffle Kosa up to see what he's got. But yeah, at that time that wouldn't have worked well, but I could see that at some point in this season, given the combination of age and injury history with the 2 Red Wings goalies here.
Without a doubt. I mean, to think that they're going to go the entire season with only Gibson and Talbot. Gibson's, I think, 32. Talbot is 38. That, one or both of those guys isn't going to get injured. Both have had a history of injuries. That's just not going to happen. That would take they'd have to be quite lucky for that, for both of those guys to be unscathed. So we're going to see somebody from Grand Rapids up at some point this season, maybe both of those guys. And not necessarily Kosa, even though he was billed as the goalie of the future. It's going to be whoever's playing the best out of Kosa or Postava, I would assume would get the first crack at it if there's an injury up here.
That's interesting. So you think it's going to be, obviously everything is performance based, but you think it's just going to be the hotter goalie would go up based on kind of the recent history? They wouldn't necessarily prioritize Kosa since he's been in the system for longer?
Yeah, that's what I think. A lot of times, too, what happens is if they need somebody just for a game or 2 as a backup, then they won't take the goalie that's playing. They won't take the better goalie away from Grand Rapids, because they want him to whoever the Griffins want to start, they keep him there. But if it's just the backup, they'll take like the number 2 goalie. But if it's to play a game, if they need it, if one of their goalies, one of the Red Wings goalies is out for an extended period of time, to the point where they're going to have to play one of those Grand Rapids guys, then it wouldn't necessarily be Kosa. I think it would be whoever's playing better. Because you got to remember, Postava, doesn't have any NHL experience, but he does. And, it's just a Czech league, you can say, but he has extensive experience playing there, and he won a championship there, so he knows what it's like in a little bit of a pressure situation, and also playing against men. Whichever, like I said, whichever one is separated, if even one separates himself, then I would expect that guy to be the one who gets the first shot up here.
That'll be an interesting battle to watch, especially because they kind of have a 1A, 1B situation at both levels that, like you said, may have flipped on both levels here. But we got to take a quick break. We'll come back here with Ansar Khan of M Live and talk some more hockey and see where he sees the season heading and if they need to shore up any weaknesses here. But stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back with Ansar Khan of M Live, talking some puck. I'm curious who has stuck out to you so far. I know we talked about the young guys, and obviously, I feel like a lot of these interviews that we do on the different teams, it happens with every team. It doesn't matter if it's the Red Wings or the Pistons or the Lions. We have a tendency to kind of undervalue or maybe not talk about kind of the stars. Raymond was a guy that's an obvious young star of the team, but was a little bit cold, let's say. He had the injury earlier in the season, but you kind of highlighted that hopefully this will be something that brings him back, because I feel like it happened with DeBrincat earlier in the year where, man, he was so close. He was hitting every part of that post and the crossbar and both posts, but he was not able to get that puck in. Then once he did, the levee kind of broke and he was able to get in more. That play that Raymond made, which was a great one, hopefully that'll be something that'll help him surge as the season progresses here.
Yeah, I think one of their issues here is the usual suspects are producing. Larkin, DeBrincat is hot right now. Raymond is hot. Kane coming back from that injury, but they know what he can do. Those 4 guys mainly are carrying the offense. They really need more secondary scoring. A guy like Marco Kasper, who had a tremendous second half last season as a rookie, they need to get him going. Veterans like they need more secondary scoring, or any secondary scoring from guys like Kopp, Comfort, and Rasmussen. You just can't have those top end guys, top 4 you can call them, just carrying the team. They need more support there. I think that's going to be one of the keys going forward.
Do you see that coming from people on the existing roster? And who, I know you talked about a couple names, and obviously one is Casper, who's got a lot of skill, but isn't necessarily finding the same flow. Probably trying to deal with the different rotations, and he's a young guy starting off the year, even though he had a good year last year. Who are some of the other guys that you see as being able to kind of level themselves up as the season goes on?
Casper would be the main one. I think he scored 19 goals last year, and I believe he has 3 so far. We're about 19 games into the season. He can produce more, and he's a guy that plays consistently in the top 6. And those other guys that I mentioned, they can get more out of Kopp, Rasmussen, and Comfer. And if not, then they're going to have to look for offense through a trade. As far as areas of the team that can improve, you could say the same about the defense too. it'll be interesting to see as we get closer to the still a long ways away, the March 6th deadline, if they're still in this playoff race by then, whether Yzerman elects to just stand pat like he did last year, or if he makes a move and brings somebody in who can have an impact. You'll recall, a little bit of controversy after the season when Jonah Larkin said, players were a little disappointed that a move was made at the trade deadline when they were in the race. Yzerman didn't really appreciate that, saying, countering with, well, we needed our best players to be our best players in March, and they weren't. That's been a problem for them the last 2 or 3 years. They've just faltered in March, and it'll be interesting to see what happens this year, assuming that they're still in it. And I think they will be. The league is really, there's a tremendous amount of parity. There's not a whole lot of separation. About the only thing you can count on is the Buffalo Sabres missing the playoffs.
That they were brought up as one of the longest streaks here currently with some of the Jets and some of the other ones we see, the New York Jets across sports. But I'm curious about that part with the trade deadline, because one of the things that was interesting to me about the Gibson trade is that there was some talk about that at the trade deadline. They just didn't have the right circumstances to make that deal, and then they ended up doing it in the offseason, obviously. So I'm hoping that since Yzerman has been in the fold for a while and making some of these discussions, hopefully he can make a move or be better positioned to do that at the trade deadline if they need to, because not that they already need a change. I think there are a lot of reasons for hope right now with the young guys, with the veterans that they layered in there, and the fact that this isn't going to be the final roster, most likely, even if you don't make a player acquisition during the season, because of some of the guys you're talking about in Grand Rapids and elsewhere that could filter up and then fill in some of those roles and then take some of that slack and get something going. But you brought up the defense that has seemed to improve, but man, the transition has been tough for them. I feel like last year it seemed to be kind of fortifying things in front of the net. This year they do have even guys like Sider, who are clearly key parts of this team. They do have some key giveaways that have led to a lot of chances from the other teams. So that's something they've got to be looking at too. Guys that are solid at that back line, both defensively, but able to make that puck transition and move it up the ice, because that's been one of the most glaring weaknesses to me is being able to transition from defense to offense and not lead to an opposing break.
Yeah, I think it was it wasn't the Buffalo game, but the game before that, where Sandin Pellikov was benched for the last 15 minutes. Concerns about some defensive play there. He made the team based on his skills, his offensive ability, his ability to play on the second power play unit. But it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward, whether they intend to continue. He's played in the top four all season, and it is a lot to ask for a 20-year-old. Can he keep it up? If not, I could see a scenario where they make a trade for a veteran defenseman and send him down because he's certainly not going to play. He's not going to be an extra up here when he can be playing 20, 25 minutes a game in Grand Rapids. And I also think that they want him to be on that second pairing. If they feel he's not good enough to be on that second pairing, I'm pretty sure they're not going to play him on the 12 minutes a game on the third pairing up here when he can be logging twice as many minutes in all situations down in Grand Rapids. So that's something to keep an eye on as well moving forward here.
Interesting. So you think they'd opt to re-slot that? That's something I always like watching from a roster standpoint, because really the best way to improve your roster is if you can take the existing pieces and kind of push them down. But in hockey, especially with a young player like you're talking about, being able to cycle back and forth between the AHL and the NHL, the best option may not be to push them down the lines at the NHL level. It may be to get more minutes at the AHL level, and then you're strengthening kind of both at the same time, because you still got some third, fourth line guys that are strengthened at the NHL level in getting experience there, and then you've got more minutes for them to get a little bit more seasoning at the AHL level. So yeah, I feel like that's been the main thing really for the off season and the last couple trade deadlines is hey, they could use some defensive reinforcements, but it just doesn't seem like they've found the right fit. It kind of seems similar to the goalie situation, where they know they've got some guys brewing in the system. They've got some young guys that should be the future, but they need a John Gibson style move there. They need a guy that can fill in until those reinforcements are ready.
Yeah, with Sam and Pellica, like you said, they got the flexibility there. That he can obviously he still has a couple of years left where he can go down without waivers, so it'll depend entirely on his play, they've got Bernard Docker and Travis Hamonek. Both of those guys have been kind of rotating in and out of the lineup. But you don't really see either of those guys at the top being the second pairing. They're mainly, third pairing guys. They could move Albert Johansson up to the second pairing, which he did a good job the second half of last year. But I also suspect that if they feel Sandin Pellica isn't quite ready. Now, because he doesn't really have much pro experience in North America. He only played a few games for the Griffins last year. If they feel he's not ready, I would suspect that they would look to upgrade that position rather than move the young Johansson up to the second pairing.
They've got some flexibility. I feel like that's the main thing that I've taken out of, this interview and the season as a whole, because it just felt like they were kind of lacking resources last season. You could see some holes, but they weren't really able to fill them with what they had on the roster. Whereas they've got some guys to try. They've held pretty nicely with the current roster, and they've got some young guys that, hey, the other factor that we're not talking about is these guys could look a lot different at the end of the season than they do at the beginning, because young guys traditionally are the ones that can have the biggest improvement over the course of the season, because something clicks, the experience helps, and they find their fit on the ice. They benefit from the coaching and the mentorship from the more experienced guys, because they have that. They have Larkin, they have Kane, one of the most experienced guys in the NHL right now. They get added Van Riemsdyk, so it'll be an interesting season. I'm excited for it, and like I said, they keep it interesting. But appreciate you coming on to cover them for us. Hopefully we'll get you back on, but want to make sure to give you a chance to direct people to your coverage here as well.
Yeah, it's mlive.com.
Be sure to follow him there. There's a lot of hockey coverage that he does, and a lot of great coverage there as a whole, but be sure to follow the articles there, and we appreciate you joining the show, and we'll look forward to having you on another time here.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks. Talk to you later. Thanks to Ansar Khan. Appreciate him joining us, as well as Blake Silverman and then Dr. Williams here in the first segment. We'll take a quick break and then close up the show after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy you could join us here on Homemade Bread Day. We didn't ask people about their favorite bread. I kind of lost track of that, and we had so much talk about the health. I didn't really want to push bread. I didn't know what to do there. Aaron was trying to be good. He didn't even take any of his snacks into the studio since Dr. Williams was here. But want to thank him along with all of our other sponsors. Mary Freebed, we've got some new content coming for them. I believe we're going to be talking about their therapy side of things. They got a lot of great stuff going. They're changing the skyline of that area there. They're doing a lot of construction with the new hospital. So they've got a lot of stuff going. Collectible insurance services. They keep coming out with different collectible highlights here. They had Pokemon as a recent one. And so for people that were kind of the right age to be fans of Pokemon, that stuff is very hot. So they had a good article about that. But Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, we're trying to get the Halls on. Tate's too big time. It's tough to get on his schedule. He's going to be a professional tennis player probably here in like 10 years. He's doing that, but hopefully we'll get him on at some point. Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Right Hand Investments, Encore Business Group. They're the presenting sponsor of the other show here. They've got a lot of good memorabilia stuff going. We'll have them in for some content. Jim Hageland of JH Realty and Williams Chiropractic, who we highlighted today. And they might have even sold Aaron on being in the fold here as a new patient. I think he's going to get some new patients out of this. I've had a very good experience. And Aaron, what'd you think of my idea? Did you hear my idea when I was proposing that to Dr. Williams that we're going to do maybe a draft of Thanksgiving foods? I think that'll be Dan because he's on the docket for Thanksgiving, but we'll have everybody that's involved in the show do like a main and 3 sides, and we do a draft.
Yeah, I like that idea, honestly, because that's a tough one for me. I'd have to sit there and think about that one.
And then you got to have strategy like the real draft too, because it's like, hey, are you going to pick your main first? Or are you going to try to go for some of your sides? The sides are going to get taken up quickly. If we have 5 or 6 people in the mix here, that's 15, 18, 20 sides that we're going to have to work our way into. And I don't want green bean casserole. I don't want that one. That's not for me. It might be for other people, but I've got to go with some of the other sides. But yeah, we might have some fun here. We're probably going to try to do a Thanksgiving episode. Everybody is in for it, it looks like, so we'll be doing that. But before then, we got a lot of programming in between. We've got the Sports Project coming up Wednesday from 7 to 9. That'll be Big G filling in there. In front of the show, Joey Williamson will be on with them, it sounds like. And then also the Sports Project 10 to 12. I think the sports professor will be back for that one on Saturday. Then you've got us Monday from 7 to 9, but also in between, you've got Shane Graham's Extra Points with me on 7 to 9 on Thursday. We've got some good football coming for you, football coverage. Don't get too down about the loss here. Shane will talk us through it, and there's some positives to take out of it, but we'll have Ty Shalter and Glenn Irby, and I think Jacob Wessendorf will be on as well to preview the upcoming Packers game, because we got to start talking Thanksgiving with our draft and everything else. But until then, we'll talk to you on Thursday and then next Monday. But stay informed and stay vigilant and have a great week.
Country with a Twist. Jethro FM. 1530 AM. WYGR Wyoming Grand Rapids. 94.9 FM Grand Rapids. 99.5 FM Lowell. And Jethro South. 980 AM WAKV Otsego Plainwell. 98.9 FM Otsego. And 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.